Hello?
James.
Yeah.
This is Thomas.
Thomas,
Thomas Brungart. I've been on the show like 40 times this year.
have you?
I think so. I have an idea for a Christmas flick I wanted to pitch you to see if we can do another episode before the year ends.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry. It's not something stupid like Die Hard. I'm not an idiot. You should know that I've been on the show for 40 times this year. I'm shooting for 100 next year, but we could talk about it's a soft 100. We could talk about that later. The movie I want to do is Batman Returns.
Batman Returns. You know we do horror, right?
I can justify it because, I was here to do the Joker, and I feel like any movie in the DC universe.
I never did the Joker.
We did the Joker, and it was great, and it made sense, and I think we can make sense of Batman Returns, It has all of the elements of a classic horror sequel. It has an animal in the title, and it has the word returns. It's already scary. We got a very scary penguin-type character and a cat who's really into bondage. I feel like that's everything Dawn would want. So, this feels like a done deal to me. Am I wrong?
I don't know. I don't know that our audience wants to hear that, to be honest. I don't think so. I don't think it really fits what we're doing.
Okay, well, can you at least commit to doing the next DC movie with me? I feel like I should have the market on Batman. If you're going to do Batman, do it with me.
You have my word. If we ever do Batman anything, you're the man. Hello?
Hey, James. It's Josh Ruben.
Hey, man. What's up? What's going on?
I have a great idea for an episode.
Yeah. What is it, man?
I want to talk about Batman Returns, because it would just be great. It'd be great, and I bet literally no one else has thought to do that one, and I would be excited to do it.
I'm down. Let's do it, man. How about right now? Welcome to episode 85 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And rewatching this movie, I really noticed Penguin's collection of oils, and I'm very disturbed.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And sometimes when I was a kid watching this movie and growing up, I often wished that I was Oswald Cobblepot and my family had just dumped me off somewhere so I didn't have to, grow up with people.
Well, one person we would never throw away is Josh Ruben, and he's here today. Hey, Josh,
Hello.
Thank you so much for doing the show, man.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously we did the Scare Me episode, which everyone should check out after this one and watch your movie if they haven't, because holy shit, great movie. But why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself? Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and, where they can find Scare Me and or whatever else you have going on.
Well, my name is Josh Ruben. I'm an actor and writer and filmmaker here in the United States of America. I'm the creator of a movie called Scare Me, which debuted on Shudder and is now available anywhere you can rent or buy movies, iTunes, etc. You can check me out just about all over, mostly doing impressions of Jason Bateman or Jeff Bridges, but I'm trying to get into the horror space, so I'm happy to be here.
Very
Check
cool.
it all out.
What led you to the horror space? Has that been a lifelong thing, or did something really pull you into it, or what?
I was a horror fan before I was I'm known mostly for comedy, especially for my years at College Humor. But yeah, what pulled me in was probably my sister Rachel introducing me to, Freddy Krueger and, Freddy's Nightmares when he had a TV show very briefly, movies even to, those kind of gateway films like Beetlejuice and Ghostbusters, even Jaws, Stephen King's Cat's Eye, and also the pop art of the VHS era. I'm 37.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up in the early 80s, and that there's just something about the kind of decade of, or I guess decades, but specifically the 80s, about that colorful, pulpy aesthetic the practical effects, puppetry, that kind of, that gray area between, what's appropriate for children and not, that I think has led me here and led me to love it so much.
I love that. Yeah, we talk a lot about the VHS doorway, as I call it. Mm-hmm. We had Paul Michael Anderson on the show one time. We went crazy with that. I think we cut like 15 minutes of us talking about it because there was so much. But yeah, that's one of the best doors, and one of the things I miss most about my childhood that people just don't have now. We get cool posters, but it's not the same, like scrolling through Netflix isn't the same as walking down those aisles.
Not at all. Not at all.
So I am 42, so I'm in that same group that was heavily influenced by all of those films and the VHS stuff. Don is 87. He just looks really good.
You look great.
Yeah, it was a special time period where we had that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And too, just having made a horror film, or at least a film that sort of is accepted in the genre, even though it's not quite a traditional horror film, it's been incredible to see just what the community is, especially like on Twitter. It kind of feels like there's this little bubble community of the same, 500, 100 even people, from, you guys to Barbara Crampton and Rob Savage. It's like this really fun, to Lee Winnell. It's like this funny, maybe it's just people I follow, but it feels like everybody's sort of talking about the same, the history, the love of Halloween, the curation, even to someone like Sam Zimmerman, who curates everything on Shudder. And just to kind of be involved into what is a very it's an accepting community, and one that all we all share that era, and are the people who grew up and now can work in the industry to kind of recreate those pockets of childhood, much like the Duffer Brothers did in the most ultimate way. But it's certainly what I'm trying to do in my life and career.
No, I love that. We did all 31 episodes of The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror in October.
Whoa,
and
awesome.
It does this thing where there's the 10 seasons that we loved, right? And then it gets really fucking weird for like 15 years. And then at the end, it came back so strong, and it felt like those. And I was like, that's weird. I wonder why that is, because I'm an idiot who doesn't think these things out. And somebody pointed out to me, they're like, because the kids that loved those episodes are making the new ones. And I was like, holy fuck, you're right. And I'm seeing the same thing with horror. We're not getting a full renaissance back. We're doing new stuff. We're going new places, but you can see the influences. And I love that. And then I don't know how many of our episodes you've listened to, but we have this friend we promote nonstop, Gory Corey. Gory is 17 years old, and her blog is like better social commentary than we're doing. And we love her to death. And she's just totally into like the pulse of what teens are looking for in horror and that kind of stuff. And yet she's very, very grounded in the history that we love as well. And it's just been really cool seeing this this outside capsule into a world that I'm not a part of. I'm not hanging out with 17-year-olds, it's really neat to wonder what's coming.
Is there sort of a takeaway from observing that and having those conversations? Because I know an even younger generation than Gory Corey and my best friend's niece, whose name is Ginger, and watched what did she watch recently? I think she watched maybe Freaky and said it wasn't scary, and she's like 10. But she's like, gonna be Karin Kusama or Megan Navarro or something. I'm wondering what if anything, there's just kind of a thesis, snippet takeaway.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna base this off of conversations with Corey and my own observations. and a couple of the Comic-Cons we did last year where we had younger people asking us questions. So my response to that, yeah, like just blowing our minds with amazing questions. But my takeaway has been these kids are going through fucking active school shooting drills and actual school shootings, and they're dealing with social media bullies, and they're processing COVID now and being shut down and alone, except their way of using social media before all this is paying off better than ours because they knew how to take care of this and how to live in that world. And so basically my answer to you is our generation and the others around us have given them such a shitty world to live in that they're not scared of what we consider horror. And I'm fucking terrified of what they're bringing us, because these movies are going to be, if these movies are going to scare them, I'm going to piss my pants. So, but no, my real answer, I kind of made a joke there at the end, but I'm still serious at the same time. Like, I just feel like they've experienced such a different level of fear than we have between wars and, I mean, they're too young for 9/11 even now, but like the 9/11 generation or anybody else, like they've had all this crazy shit that we didn't deal with in the 80s and 90s. Like we were like, shit, a rock star blew his head off, like,
Yeah.
And,
I mean, you said it with cyberbullying, like the fact that that experience is lacking in a way where where the deficit for them is perhaps the social courage to a degree of, writing a note and handing it to someone you have a crush on, which is quite literally something that I did in, whatever it was, junior high. They are experiencing that level of communication, a dip in sexual activity, technically, or a different relationship to physical relationships. But what bullying is, and if you look at, I mean, I've been subject to, and, minor occasions, bot bullying or sort of bot spamming from, basically like kids' Finstagrams or whatever that feel very kind of feel violent and anxiety inducing and really, really freaky because they're so good at it and you can't track them. And it's really, really unusual. And I couldn't imagine as a kid who was, bullied, physically, not anything crazy, but what it would mean to toy with someone's reputation in a way to like spread word about someone really quick, or a photo, or spam, or whatever the fuck. I can't imagine. So great point though. I'm grateful for that observation. That's getting my gears turning for sure.
Yeah, we'll make Corey respond to you on Twitter about this, because I'm gonna have her listen to this. But she'll have.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah, as you should. She's amazing. But anyway, yeah. So I'm so fascinated by where horror is gonna go with them, because I look at where horror is going with the people writing right now, and we get these little throwbacks, but we get such cool new shit as well. And that's what your film did for me. It was a total change. I've already told you this, but our listeners don't know this. I am not a fan of writers who only write the occupation of writing. And it really soured me on a lot of Stephen King stuff, because it felt like all he ever had characters do was be a writer in a situation. And it made me nuts, because there's so many other things to do. And so normally that's an instant turnoff for me. And your film brought something so new to that. And it also hit this horror that so many of my friends deal with daily, of toxic masculinity and just, you're a girl, you can't do that, and gatekeeping and all that bullshit. And I was so fascinated that you took this concept that is so basic to writing, which is jealousy and just, always comparing yourself, even if you love and respect and want to work with, sometimes it's still there, and you took that and you twisted the shit out of it in an all new way I hadn't seen, at least on this level. And So if you can do something like that with something like this, and then, what everybody's doing with the rest of horror is just great. Because this is my long way of saying this. All those movies that we loved in the VHS aisle were the same fucking movie over and over again. And I love that horror is branching out in so many different ways right now. I think that's so fucking cool. So thank you for bringing something new to the table and hopefully influencing others to do the same.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that, man. I mean, Jordan Peele, I was just watching one of these Eli Roth, history of horror things, and
yes,
say what you will about yeah, it's awesome. I mean, the people he's getting to and the access and everything else. But Jordan Peele said something really awesome about us specifically, especially having had such a hit with Get Out. He was like, I was the pressure there after you made this $1 billion horror film to create another hit, and he said something really awesome, which is that I had to truly ask myself what scares me and what my vulnerabilities were and expose it. And that's a piece of what I did with Scare Me, but in sort of those, icky, jealous feelings and the like. But I think that's why it sort of moved as quick as it did, and it's a piece of what's going on in the era, and also just kind of, hopefully what it'll inspire in other people is to write idiosyncratically, write granularly to their experience, which is also just the key to great creative period. You could look at something as, say what you will about Lena Dunham, but Tiny Furniture, which launched her, and then exclude conversations about privilege and everything else. Well, this is something specific to her experience, as was with Jordan Peele's outlook on the, say, immigration allegory, or, Ari Aster's outlook on mental health and family and everything else. The more granularly these great filmmakers are sort of, looking at their work, the more successful. That's, hopefully that's what we all can do as creators, and and keep writing what we know, I guess you could say, without always, making your protagonist a writer.
Definitely. Don, what about you? Do you ever write about writers? I don't know.
Not the first. I mean, I wrote, at least in the first book, Bastards of the Bayou, one of the main characters is a history professor. So I did lend at least a profession that I knew into that character, into that world. But no, I've never thought about doing that because of what you said earlier, which is you just kind of feel like it's been done so many times. How can you do it, to where it's fresh? And so all the other stories that are sitting in notebooks, none of them actually involve any of that. One did, but I immediately killed it off, which is the one I'm working on now, the husband was a writer, the wife was a doctor, and they had moved their family into this house, and basically becomes a haunted house story. So I killed that and turned it into a group that was going on a tour of a southern plantation. So instead of the house they moved into being a former slave plantation, it's now a tour of a southern slave plantation, and they get stuck there and have to deal with the ghosts.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
I think you actually go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, once I made that change from going with kind of the more comfortable and predictable thing, and then figuring out this is something that's going to have a lot more meaning, especially when I take shots at hey, let's have a wedding at this place. You get to have a little bit more fun with the stuff that you hate, and get to drive a lot of the fear off of that.
I think you hit the nail on the head with what I don't like about using writing as the main character. If it serves the story, it's very different. But I feel like too often it's a way of giving somebody a job where they don't have to report to anybody, and it doesn't matter if they're doing something else for 2 weeks. Whereas like something like Sinister, his job is writing, like it's a true crime writer, and then it feeds into the whole story, and I don't mind it there. And I didn't really notice that until you were talking about adding history professor, because I was like, well, that doesn't bother me because at least that's interesting. It's different, you know? And yeah, I think that's the key. And that's what Josh does really well here. I'm talking about you like you're not here now. I'm sorry. But in Scare Me, like, it serves a purpose. It's the driving force. Like, it's not just, oh, I'm a writer, and then it's never brought up again.
Right.
So thanks. You guys solved my problem for me. I can quit the show now.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Do you have any other projects that you want to talk about or are able to talk about, or anything else before we move on?
Well, the next movie is called Werewolves Within, and it stars the great Sam Richardson and a hell of a cast. But that's probably all I can say, other than it's like another movie with people in a house in a storm. So I guess I've got my brand.
Awesome.
Well, I just like how this film, Scare Me, leads into Werewolves Within, because you have that story that's I was going to say read, but that story that's told and built in Scare Me between the two authors, especially when Fanny is trying to help Fred out and say, like, hey, you should say it this way, or use this word. So it's cool to see that connection.
Total serendipitous coincidence, by the way. And here's another wild layer to it, and then we can finally talk about what the users came here for, I'm sure. But I'm happy to talk about this all damn day, which is, the producers of Werewolves Within, Matt Miller and Natalie Metzger, had just finished producing a movie called The Werewolf, which then became The Wolf of Snow Hollow. So they watched Scare Me, having been in post, or just we're I guess in the middle of post on Wolf of Snow Hollow, or it was going to become Wolf of Snow Hollow when they did the title change, and then pitched me on this next werewolf movie, and then leapfrogged essentially into another werewolf movie. And then you also just kind of link the fact that Fred was writing this cursed story he couldn't wrap his head around, and it was wild, and to look at some plot similarities and setting similarities, and also too to be able to bring a bigger film back to the Hudson Valley where I'm from, to bring a bigger film to the area and business to the area was also just killer. But a lot of wild coincidence in 2019 and 20.
All right, I suppose we'll talk about Batman Returns since it means so much to you. Batman Returns is one of my favorite memories of high school. Again, I'm a little older than Josh, but I remember going to the midnight showing of this. I remember being outside with my friends for like 2 hours before we went because, we had to kill time, and it's not like we had anywhere else to go. So we just hung out outside the theater. We were smoking because we were super cool back then. And, just hanging out, just shooting the shit, having a great night with your friends. But it's one of those memories that's just totally burned into my head. And I'm so excited to talk about this. So, yeah. Also, I want to point out I was 14 when I say this. So there you go.
Don, where were you? Did you see it in the theater?
I was I didn't have cool parents that let me go to the movies at midnight. So I had to wait until this was on video. Because
I didn't either, but I had an aunt and uncle who didn't pay attention.
No, I didn't get to see it in the movie theater. I think I got to see it on VHS. It was just one of those things that it was there at Blockbuster. We got a copy, grabbed our copy, watched it. And I was upset because I was a huge Batman fan as a kid. I didn't see the first one in the movie theater. I saw the third one in the movie theater, but the first and second, it was on VHS. And I was a little upset with my parents that I didn't get to see either of these movies. Because growing up in the 80s, you loved Michael Keaton. Like everything he was in was pretty much great. Like Johnny Dangerously, Mr. Mom, Gung Ho. Like there was any movie I saw him in, he could play the same character, but there was a different feel in every movie that he was in. Mm-hmm. But no, when this movie came out, I just remember it was. Again, as a teenage boy, one of the things I thought about was like, man, that Catwoman lady is kind of sexy. And I recall one of the interviews that Michael Keaton did at the time where he said, yeah, that whole scene where she licks me, I kept saying, we got to shoot that again. We didn't get it right. So we shot it like 10, 11 times because I'm like, no, something's wrong about that one. Let's do it again. So that's the one thing I remember about that film, or at least the building around that film and the production around that film was Michael Keaton in interviews talked about how he kept saying, we just didn't get the kiss right. We didn't get the lick right. So it's like, no, let's do this again.
Oh my God. And I'm just going to point out those two have never worked together again. I mean, not that there's always an opportunity to. And not that he's ever been canceled. He seems like a total gentleman. But anyway, that's.
But I mean, it could have been just him joking in an interview. You know,
absolutely.
It was just one of those that, as a kid, and especially at that time period, you didn't think anything would have been awkward about the way he said it. You're kind of like, man, it's a pretty girl. Yeah, I want to try and get her to kiss me as much as possible.
Well, you're stirring three specific memories I have of this film, and they're super quick. But the first is because I did see this movie in the theaters, and in '92 I was born in '83, so if that math is right, I was 9 years old with my friend and his parents, who took the two kids, who took these two buddies to see it. And I remember number one, when he put the car he didn't put it in reverse, but when Batman was fighting sort of the first gigantic fight scene against all the clowns, he put the car in drive and blasted fire, setting one of the clowns straight up on fire with the Batmobile, and the crowd erupted, and it gave me chills. And I remember feeling like the bass and the music and the image, if you're the filmmaker talk, but like I can imagine the POV of the screen and like the whole fucking room being lit red with that fire. But I remember that reaction. And then two, playing on, what you just said, or adding to what you just said. I mean, I was 9 years old, but there were these scenes like, Michael Keaton kissing or intimately talking to Michelle Pfeiffer on the dance floor, and the look of her neck and the proximity of like his mouth to her neck. And like I was picturing like how she smelled like as a 9-year-old kid that was like, not quite, like experimenting with himself, let's say. And then like, and the lick scene just being like, it just kind of, that curious thing, like, I don't know if I should be watching this or whatever else. But the third memory I have is that same friend, I guess it would be probably with the gap of when movies, exit theaters and then go into rotation on VHS. I remember going to his house probably close to a year later, and his parents having come home from the grocery store. And at the grocery store, you could buy videotapes and DVDs. And they had the Batman Returns VHS. And I remember the sight of that and just being so insanely jealous as the then, 10-year-old who's Batman obsessed. I can't fucking believe you have it. We have to watch it right away. But yeah, right. You're stirring some artisan memories that I'd forgotten.
That's awesome. My memory from the screen is one of the ones you talked about, and it's the dance scene. And it just really struck out because I also clearly remember analyzing her neck. And I don't know, maybe it's how it's shot, maybe it's the age again or whatever, but that's the scene that has stuck with me my entire life. Yeah. That's interesting.
I refer to it as, there must be something about it because we're all talking about it. I mean, there must be something about it because, and also, aside the fact that like Michelle Pfeiffer is and remains a babe, but there was something about that where I referred to it maybe once a year or once every 2 years when the movie comes up, that I say that was the scene that put me through puberty. That was, like not the looking scene, not other scene, but it was like making up by the fire scene, finding the scar. But it was like that scene. There was just something about the intimacy of it, which is wild. That like, we're three different ages and watching that, and three different times and experiences or you moments in your life and kind of feeling similarly. But anyway, it's interesting.
I want to go back to the clown on fire, because there is this weird thing with Bat fans where they constantly tell me Batman doesn't kill people. And I remember everybody being like, Ben Affleck was killing people, he can't be Batman. And I'm like, did you watch Batman Returns? Because this motherfucker goes through the ghetto and just like takes people out constantly. He's smashing heads together. He's lighting people on fire, throwing people off of stuff. And I'm just like that's the Batman that I loved too. You know, like I look at it now and I make fun of how he's a multi-billionaire and could be helping people instead of beating them up. But back then, he was just the badass taking out bad people, and I loved it.
If you're a real Batman fan, you know, you would know what Batman Year 2 is. Batman Year 2, he gets the gun from, was it Joe Chill, that killed his parents, and he goes after people with it, specifically this Grim Reaper villain. But he was fucking shooting people. You know, he had a moment when Batman had he was like rolling around with the 45. But, you know, I thought that moment specifically, you know, especially after, well, you know, certainly the end of the first one having killed the Joker, but yeah.
Well, and what's really cool about the whole Batman not killing people thing, it became part of the lore, the myth of Batman's character or whatever, but it was one of those things that stayed around for so while as far as like the main storyline for Batman. So people accepted that, but they weren't accepting the other iterations of Batman, just like you see with the movies. But what's interesting about this, I'm going to come back to Hitler, which
whoa, okay,
is the reason why Batman initially stopped killing people was because of Hitler. And when the comic book was in circulation, there were parents that started writing and saying, you know, we think this is too violent, and some of the stuff that he's saying, the rhetoric is a little too close to what Hitler is saying over in Germany. So the writers of the comic book changed it to where Batman would not kill. Like he would capture, instead of killing the gangsters and all these other things, he would capture them, take them to jail, and let, you know, the courts prevail. So it was a cool little factoid with comic book history that, you know, it was the imagery or the Hitler's personality or whatever it was is the reason, or the way people were reacting to it was the reason why initially Batman changed to, I'm not going to kill people, but I have all these guns and rockets on every vehicle I have.
yeah, I'm going to miss every single time. Yeah. I'll still use them, but I will miss. And, you know, I mean, hey, we end Batman Returns, you know, not to, you know, jump around crazy, but, you know, it's like God, he does kill the Penguin. I mean, you know, and he's bleeding black all over his you know, his white Arctic base. But yeah, it's fascinating. That's crazy.
I had no idea where you were going when you said to bring this back to Hitler. I was like, what?
Well, you know, but well, here's the thing. Why I'm saying Hitler. Okay, so when the movie starts off, as far as with Oswald Cobblepot, the character that becomes the Penguin, the question I kept asking myself, even when I watched the film, you know, years ago, not when I was 14, obviously, but years ago, there was always that question of nature versus nurture, or, you know, if you had a chance to go in a time machine, would you kill baby Hitler? And then some people make this argument and say, no, if you just raise him differently, raise him to do this, so he won't turn out that way. But you don't have the opportunity to figure that out. So is Oswald destined to be evil or a bad guy because he was abandoned, or is that something that he's always going to be? Because he could have been a good guy who had been abandoned. There are plenty of people who are abandoned and turn out to be nice people, but then there are also people who have families and were raised with families that turn out to be complete monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I meant by bringing it back to Hitler.
Are you guys aware of the extensive history that was written for Penguin for this? Like everything that happened to him between the 33 years?
No, go ahead.
So I only read about this once, so my summary might be a little off, but you can find it online. I'll try to remember to post it to our social media. But basically, like, the whole concept is that Penguin went into the sewers, and then somehow when he was old enough, he joined the circus, and he was Flipper Boy. And that's where he meets the Red Triangle gang, because they were all there as well. And he's so abused and so shit on for being Flipper Boy that it feeds this need to kill everybody and this, like, hatred of everyone except the Red Triangle gang. But he also, like, never felt at home with them either. And basically then somehow he comes back to the sewers. But in that time, like the circus had returned to Gotham and, you know, different things like that. And so there's a theory that that's when his parents die, is like when the circus returns. And that's why they're both dead. And I noticed watching this that there's no dates on their grave. And I thought that was interesting. But we'll come back to that. Also, really fast on that note, because I'm going to forget this. When Penguin's walking up to their grave, he hits another grave and the fucking thing wobbles. And I'm like, nobody noticed this in post? Come on. But anyway, so the theory is, so the theory is that they, like, you know, somehow he or his friends there or whatever killed his parents then. So he already knew who his parents were, obviously. Oh, yeah. And then when he comes back and he's living in the sewer, he invites the troop that's been disbanded to join him, and he basically becomes their king down there, and then starts his revenge plot. And I just thought it was interesting that, and this is written so much better than I've explained it, but I thought it was really interesting that there's this rich history, but it also lines up with what we get. Because we do see the headlines in the newspaper of the circus, and we do see these other little things, and that both parents being dead or whatever else. And it's weird to me how there's no mention of what happened to them. There's no, like, where did their fortune go? There's no any of that, you know? And I just thought it was really cool how everything in it still ties in with this. So I don't know, something to check out.
I like that that there's an abuse storyline, and you can then imagine how it sort of feeds into it all. Because I remember as a kid thinking, like, how the hell did this baby grow up to convince and, like, come to power, and manipulate this army essentially to do its bidding, to do his bidding. That's fascinating. I love to deep dive. It's something I'd always thought about. Like, no shit, he was abused.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's not just abandoned, though. I always wondered, like, even the first time I saw it, I was like, how did the penguins change his diapers when he was little? They don't have diapers down there, and they have fucking flippers.
Right.
Like, what?
Oh, just shit his cold cloth for at least a decade. Maybe that was the flipper trick. Yeah, I mean, it plays back into into why I fingered this film for being a horror film, and while working on serendipitously for being a holiday film. But I remember sitting in the theater and my heart beating furiously with the birth of this kid and the actors' reactions, Paul Rubens included, hey Pee-wee, their reactions to this child, and not seeing it, but the actors and the way that Tim Burton shot it was so unsettling and so dreadful. The doctor's reaction and only for them to escalate to these fucking rich parents, like, rushing to a bridge and tossing it into the water because God forbid they scar their reputation that they brought such a thing into this world. But the combination of, like, Paul Rubens being in arguably his first quote unquote dramatic role, to sort of see him in different makeup, but also like the unsettling nature of the birth and the doctor's reaction. And then for them to, this childhood character who I can't remember if he was outed for his, like, public masturbation by then too. So there was, like, this darkness about, him as an actor, but the whole thing being so dark and me being aware of that darkness, it just felt, it's a great horror movie beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's so dark and just so, like you said, dread-filled. And even like it's the doctor's reaction that gets me. Even now, that's what I was gonna say. Is even now, when I think about all the shit that doctors see daily, to react on that level, holy shit, you know, like that's total horror being, like you just said. It's just fucking great.
Well, then they ramp it up even more because they put the kid in a cage. I mean, well before.
Yeah, where did they get that? Where did they get that? They had that laying around.
I just love that they have him in the cage, right? They have him in this black cage that's covered on the top and on the bottom. So you just see the bars on one side. You don't really get to see him. The cat goes by the cage. He grabs it and obviously does something to it, whether he eats it or strangles it, whatever. But even that just ramps it up even more because it doesn't give you that sense that there was any good in him. It's almost as if he's evil from birth. Like he's a monster from birth, to at least drive that home for the audience.
How have I missed this whole time that he attacks a cat?
That's right. You're jogging the memory because I'm working completely off of memory. This movie is more or less burned into my brain. I didn't do the rewatch, but that's exactly right. It's essentially Rosemary's Baby. So it's that warranting or justification to I guess get rid of it, and then ultimately that this evil fucker will take over Gotham at some point.
So I did rewatch it, and I actually watched it twice. So I watched it for you, so it's fine. But no, I did it because the first time I was only half paying attention, and I had so much fucking fun with it. Like, I'm going to tell you nonstop how many mistakes I noticed and how the plot doesn't add up at all. But I want you to know this film is fun as hell. Like, I enjoyed this so much. I don't care that the plot doesn't add up. I just like making fun of it.
It does. It does hold up.
100%. If this came out today, I would enjoy it the same way. I don't know that like it would have the mass appeal following the Christian Bale Bat series, but like, I don't know. I had a blast. It was great.
People complain. Well, I guess complain or somewhere on the side of it as far as the DC being darker, right? But what a lot of people misunderstood or forgot was that Batman and Batman Returns were both dark films. It was when you got to Batman Forever and Batman and Robin and whatever the one, I think there was one that followed that one. But with those movies, they became a lot lighter, and they were more like the 1960s campy Batman as opposed to a noir version of Batman. But then the Christian Bale ones were made in the early 2000s and through, I guess, 6-7 years ago, before the Affleck ones were made. And people were just like, well, DC is going dark and it's too. I think they need to go back to that mix, like what you had with the Michael Keaton ones, where they were dark, but there was some good humor in them. I mean, the sexual innuendos rivaled, any of the James Bond movies, and the great metaphors and allegories that were offered, as opposed to, I mean, nothing against the Christian Bale ones, I liked them, but they felt like they were missing something, and maybe the humor was that part of it, whereas Batman Forever and Batman and Robin went a little bit too far with the campiness and humor. Like, Ice to Meet You.
And Joel Schumacher gets shit on a lot for those films, and I've been that person as well. But over the years, I came to really appreciate, especially the first one, Batman Forever. I've come to appreciate it for what it is instead, and it's really fun once you get past why is Gotham in Vegas now, But no, I was gonna say there actually was supposed to be a fifth movie called Batman Unchained, I believe, and it was basically Nicolas Cage as Scarecrow. That was the idea,
right?
And they were gonna bring back Jack Nicholson and everybody else, Michelle Pfeiffer, Danny DeVito, and the gas from Scarecrow. Batman was gonna have to go through these villains and accept himself or whatever you want to call it. Like he was going to have to battle that. And I think that's such a cool fucking concept. And somehow they went, well, Batman and Robin movie didn't portray anything well and everybody hates it, so you can't make this. And I'm like, no, that's all the more reason to make this. You know? And,
I wish they made
like,
that
some
and
pieces...
Beetlejuice Takes Hawaii. That's what I wish that
Yes.
got made.
I love that was the sequel for Beetlejuice. That's such a great idea. It's so ridiculous. It's fantastic. And then I just always wondered, like, were the sandworms just going to be on the beach hanging out? I don't know.
It was just I can't imagine the the early 90s cultural appropriation with, you know, it being just Hawaii and Tiki. I forget who the fuck knows what they would have done. It's like all overdoing it.
It would have been amazing. But so one of the main topics I want to talk about plays into Scare Me. And I thought this was a cool thing. I don't know that you did this on purpose when you like picked this, but Selena Kyle's entire storyline is a woman who's shit on by a man who thinks he's superior to her when, other than money, there's no reason to think that. And then she battles back. And I thought that really plays into that toxic masculinity and fragile male ego and all that shit. And so I wanted to know if you want to talk about her storyline and what you thought of it.
Well, there's definitely something in my call it, I don't know, DNA, I guess, that I'm fascinated by the underdog experience, and I don't want to call the female the underdog, but in a way that, you know, the women in our society are, they have to overachieve to be average, to be accepted. And as a kid who, you know, was sort of smaller than everybody else, or marched to the beat to his own drum, and had grew hair on his arms before anybody else, was just like an oddball kid, all these different things that made me feel kind of odd, unusual, separate, you know, being bullied and all the like, not having many buddies. I just I always kind of identified and was drawn to the underdog. And Michelle Pfeiffer played such a brilliant underdog that then comes into her power. And it's so cathartic to watch. I remember feeling that even as a 9-year-old boy, like watching Selena Kyle get I didn't know the word for misogyny. I didn't understand, you know, wouldn't know what sexism meant. But you understand the larger presence in the room, the larger man in Max Schreck approaching the smaller person, the demure woman in the glasses who works for him and, you know, spills the coffee and tries to do her best, who Bruce Wayne is curious about, get backed against a window and then shoved out that window and drop 25 stories and then, you know, sort of brought back to life. And watching her like come into power was really fucking rad. So anyway, I think that all that's to say is that I love writing for, you know, for the sort of quote unquote underdog. I don't really refer to Fanny as the underdog, but how a man ultimately in Scare Me, because he can't outdo her with his brain, he tries to outdo her or to achieve end game by screaming and essentially pounding his chest and kind of overdoing it, over roughhousing. That's something that I'm, you know, I don't know. I felt interested in kind of exploring because it's a sad, fucked up, true, scary fact, especially about, you know, men like Fred, and men who feel fractured. So anyway, I that's all to say that I was definitely fascinated by the character and certainly in seeing, I think, you know, powerful women. I'm surrounded by powerful women in my life. I have a lioness mom and lioness aunts, and, you know, to see them sort of grow and the catharsis of coming into their power, certainly in the context of Selena Kyle, is, you know, that's why it was fun as hell to watch Aya start in that position and then kind of work her way sort of backwards by the end in that kind of tragic way.
Yeah, and I think that you just explained to me why this appealed to me so much as a 14-year-old boy, and that's the feeling of being bullied all the time. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, the people who bullied me were always the stereotypical jock assholes, and they knew they couldn't outdo me in the classroom or even like with friends or be the funny person. So they hit me instead, and so that really.
Yeah.
And I was looking at this purely through a sexism, misogyny angle, but when you really spread it out to just bullying, like, that really tells me why I cared so much about Selena's story, because that's always been the story to me. Penguin is kind of an afterthought to me in this film.
Oh, fuck yeah. And also it's I think it's why probably all of us love Batman so much, and why, especially kids who only had it in the classroom and couldn't get out on the playground fucking loved him so much. Here's this is an odd person with dark tendencies who is truly solo, with the ability to take on any challenge physically and with his brain, to take it on from all angles and take on evil from all angles. So it was cathartic to watch.
The one thing that really turns me off towards the Penguin is, once Catwoman, rebuffs his advances or whatever, he's like, "Oh, I'm tired of you," and like hooks the umbrella to her neck and has her fly off. And I'm like, we could have had like 30 more minutes, because it seems as though the Penguin at that moment becomes that petulant child of like, oh, everybody's rejecting me and you're going to reject me too. And I made all these cute little sexy comments towards you. You didn't pick up on any of them. I mean, he seems like an incel before incels. I mean, he even had his oils and lotions ready for Catwoman. I mean, she should appreciate that.
Scented and unscented.
He should appreciate all the effort he put into this, especially with that great pickup line. Yeah, that's the pussy I was just thinking about or looking for or whatever it was. I'm like, yeah, because as a kid, I got the joke, but I didn't get the joke. It was one of those things where I was like, it wasn't as clever as you think about it when you get older. I was like, yeah, there's like so many innuendos there that could drive into this. But I feel as though if there had been some more time, yeah, you could have fleshed out their characters a little bit much, because it does feel as though both their stories were rushed. So if you did split it up, make it 2 movies or a 2-part movie, you could get into further of that backstory of Oswald Cobblepot, and maybe even get, have something that links him to his own parents' murder, or
Wouldn't
even
it be
getting
crazy if he was at the same circus as Robin's parents?
See, you could have had another connection.
Yeah.
You could have another connection.
While we're talking these not even hidden sexual jokes, I had no idea that Penguin is just sex obsessed through this whole thing. I don't remember this from being 14. And I mean, he literally doesn't want to take Max's offer to be mayor. And then Max says the words, unlimited poontang. And then he's like, well, okay then.
God. Oh my
and
God.
I don't remember this at all from when I was a kid. Like, I was sitting here going, holy shit, really? Because he's like, what does he say about Jan Hooks? He's like,
I'm going to teach you the flipper trick.
Yeah, he wants to teach her the flipper trick, but he wants to fill her something. I don't remember what the joke is, but it was
ballot box or something like that.
Yeah, it was something, I don't know, but it's not a joke to me. Like, it was just disgusting, and I was like, holy shit, I don't remember this at all.
Now it's extra rapey, because this is again, this is 1992. Yeah. We haven't even had that full discussion about Revenge of the Nerds being a rape movie at this point. We haven't had that discussion about the couple of the questionable moments in things like Animal House or one of my favorite movies, Bachelor Party, where there's a lot of questionable behavior by men, not always sexual assault, but at least the view that they have towards women. But this movie, the dialogue would I shouldn't say severely. The dialogue would somewhat change if this were made now, because it wouldn't be in a PG-13 movie. I could see it we have a Batman movie that's rated R, and you can have those types of comments in it because we're trying to show you how disgusting the Penguin is. Whereas in 92, we were trying to show you how funny the Penguin is by making these dirty comments.
I looked it up. It's I'd like to fill her void. And and when he says it, Jan Hooks is like leaning forward, so you get like the curve of her butt on the desk, and yeah. Anyway, and then he wants to teach her the flipper trick.
That's right. Oh my God, that's right.
Wait, we have to appreciate how much of the Penguin is currently in Frank from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh my God. That's right.
Penguin dropped his massive condom.
He's a bad boy.
That's right.
I remember it feeling quite cathartic though to watch him turn on her, to watch him send Catwoman into the sky and her to fall through the greenhouse, and then you just kind of think, oh shit, it's on. So as deplorable as he was, there must have been some method to the madness in making him. I mean, obviously he's the Penguin, so he's you have the physical abhorrence, but I remember that turn feeling really cool and me really, really excited to see what the hell is she going to do when she goes rogue and takes him on. Now that she doesn't have that alliance. Yeah, but I love the incel comparison because it's true. I mean, that's every entitled privilege, person of cash. I have a funny side story, by the way. In my commercial directing days, I had cast an actor. I can't remember how we came across him, Steve Whitting. And Steve Whitting was in Batman Returns as Josh, the campaign manager who got his nose bitten off.
Right.
And poor Steve Whitting, who is the kindest dude. Jason Bateman puts him in just about everything he works on, from a little bit part in Game Night to The Outsider. He'll also pop up in, a Scorsese flick every once in a while. He's in The Wolf of Wall Street and stuff. He's like just a, blue collar actor. He's directing. But poor Steve Whitting, so gracious. Every time I see him, I mention Batman Returns and ask him about, the set and having his nose bitten and, the blood and all that stuff. And he's, probably answered, 1,000 questions. The same exact question 1,000 times rather, but such a nice guy, and I remember being just so starstruck that anyone in my circle had been on or around that set. It's certainly the only person I know, in my immediate world. Although years later, I'd befriend Lucy DeVito and would see Rhea Perlman and Danny DeVito out. Obviously, would never ask him such a question, but the dude just is the kindest, most down to earth dude on the planet. But Steve Whitting, though, I was like, I gotta ask this dude, and just thought it was so rad. Holy shit, you had your nose bitten off by the Penguin. Yeah.
And it's such a great scene. Could be worse. My nose could be gushing blood. And everybody's like, what?
What? And all the laughter is so well timed. Oh my God. Beautiful.
Well, even the bullying, it comes into play there because he makes that comment about like not a lot of mirrors under, in the sewers or wherever he, attacking his looks.
Yep.
And, as if he's supposed to take that. Like if someone is not aesthetically pleasing to you, you're supposed to, bully them based off that, remind them that they're not as good looking as you want them to look, or just have that comfort. I mean, because I could understand that with friends would joke around with each other, but he's meeting him this first time. They're going to run his campaign, and the first thing you say to this man is, "Yeah, not a lot of mirrors down there, huh?" To imply that, he's a freak, as just like everyone else has called him or claimed him to be, while he's eating a fresh fish, which.
yeah, openly.
Oh man.
But you feel for him in that movie, it's like it's that empathy, I remember, I think again as a kid, just to be like, oh, I'm pretty sure he just made a dig at he's calling this dude ugly. So it's like, fuck, it's this warranted behavior, and to a degree you want him to win, but you also can't wait for, Batman to kick the shit out of him. I remember feeling so it was just like a combination of laughing at the image, but also so fucking excited that Batman literally just landed in front of him in the end and just like sucker punched him in the face and just like gave him a, black blood oozing nose. It was just so awesome.
Could be worse. My nose could be gushing blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Another thing with Steve Whitting is he gives Penguin the cigarette holder that Penguin is so known for from the 60s. It's a little different, but he says the words "reclaim your birthright." And he's talking presumably about Oswald's parents being involved in politics or his dad being involved in politics and that kind of thing. But it's such a cool little like nod to the history of Penguin right there as he says "reclaim your birthright" and gives him that. And Oswald just spits it out and stares at him like, "What the fuck, man?"
Well, he even has the monocle when he's in the oh my gosh, when he's in the Hall of Records or the archives. Yes. Mm-hmm. There are these moments where I'm like, oh man, that's so cool to see the paying that homage to Burgess Meredith's character from the 60s show or the 60s version. But yeah, I'm glad they went that route with it, but it was just so funny for him just to get rid of it.
I have to wonder about Max here though. Like, how is Max so bad at what he's doing that he thinks going to get Penguin while he looks like this, not dressing him up, not helping him out in any way, and then he gives him a fish that he's going to eat raw, and he thinks that's the time he's supposed to take him to everybody to take pictures and announce his mayoral candidacy? Like, I just feel like maybe Max isn't very good at this.
It's actually a pretty wild Trump allegory if you really think about it, because it's like, well, where traditional politicians have quote unquote failed, now we're going to take a risk on this deplorable human being that says anything. If you look back at it, it's like, wow, Cobblepot was fucking Trump. He was like,
who's only interested in unlimited poontang.
Yes, absolutely. It was the sexist, disgusting slob of the sewer who kind of got away with whatever and was, fascinating in that Howard Stern kind of way. It's like, what is he going to say next, do next, eat next,
Josh, I got to push back on you on this one, man. I got to push back.
Please.
Obviously, Trump is Bruce Wayne. I mean, he told Christian Bale this.
Oh my God. Poor Bob.
So Kane. if he said it, it has to be true. But
oh God, that's right. Oh,
no, it's so funny you brought this up because I was live texting Don while I'm watching, and I was like, this is crazy. Because that Max having this conversation, this is the same conversation Roger Stone and Putin had with Trump. And I was like, which is extra weird because Roger Stone always dresses like the Penguin.
That's so fucking true. Oh my God. I was trying to think, like, what villain world does he look like he's from? Yes, he is a Bob Kane character.
100%. The one thing I definitely pointed out, I mean, from the beginning of this, because it's been a few years since I've watched it. But when I watched it, the one thing that came up, obviously through the film, because they mention it so many times, is masks. But even further than that, it's this idea of duality of man. And we can start with Max Schreck, because when you and I were talking earlier, you made a joke about, like, why would this rich billionaire guy use, a cat as a symbol for his business, but then it doesn't come into play until, like, the woman that he throws out of a window turns into a cat. And after doing some digging, what makes sense is it's that idea of the logos. No company, I mean, sports teams are going to try and make a logo that looks cool, fierce, tough, whatever, right? But when it comes to companies, they don't want to present that thing that's going to give you some distance. They want to give you something that's going to make you feel comfortable at home. And what some of the theories behind this have to deal with the presentation of Disney, where you have Mickey Mouse, that's, the face of the company, or even just the way Disney is written. But then, whatever other stuff they might get involved in, like, Disney is the only privately owned company that has permission to build a nuclear reactor.
What?
I found that out when I was doing some research years ago, and it had to deal with it had to deal with their area in Florida. Now, if I'm wrong, we can go back and correct this. If somebody's listening, like that's not true.
Oh no, if you're wrong, we'll make that the trailer and
no,
point it out to everyone.
To be like centerpiece of your next book, Don. This is killer.
Killer Kingdom. But they haven't built one. They just have. I guess they have they got the permits to build one if they needed one, and it had to deal with when they decided to build in Florida the Magic Kingdom and of course everything else that was there. And the excuse was, oh well, we might need this for the power, which of course then ties back in with Max Schreck's little plan. We might need it for the power if we expand so much. But even when Disney or the Disney company was planning on building in Florida, they created fake companies or fake names to buy up real estate, because when they built Disneyland, they didn't buy all the surrounding land next to it. So all these, little shitty motels and hotels popped up, and Walt Disney was pissed off about it, saying like, this is making me look bad because we have this nice family place, and on the outside it's like all these cheap, dirty motels. It really kills the aesthetic for anybody who wants to come to Disneyland. If you're coming across the country or you're flying here and you get here and then it's like all these seedy little places, you might not have the best experience when you come to my park. So the company then decided, hey, if we're going to build somewhere else, we're going to keep it secret. So no one is going to be called Disney when we start looking for land. So they start, I can't remember, it was like Buena Vista Buena Vista Incorporated or LLC or something. But they used a fake name that they've since adopted to buy up acres of land, and then they bought the acres of land around those acres of land. So when you go to any of the Disney World parks, there's nothing around them. There are no hotels that aren't owned by them anywhere in that area, and it had to deal with controlling their image, which was a cool trick. I mean, I you have to admire at least the way that they did it to make sure that their brand can't be misused or sullied by an hourly motel that happens to be right across the street, or adult sex shops or anything like that. Because even when it came to Times Square, one of the reasons why a lot of those sex shops and strip clubs or whatever else that used to be in Times Square, why they got moved out, was because Disney wanted to build a store there. So there became this big push to get all that stuff out and get like some nice retail stuff out here, some nice stuff that the tourists can participate in, and Disney doesn't have to be right next door to an adult arcade. It's cool because the way that Shrek is portrayed in this, the outside is he's this nice, benevolent billionaire, and I wrote down the myth of benevolent billionaire, because even Bruce isn't a benevolent billionaire. Mm-hmm. He does some good stuff with his money, but in all honesty, there's a lot more that he could do. And since Batman has, since the internet has popped up, people have proposed all these different ways that Batman actually could have been a hero Bruce could have been a hero without becoming Batman. But Max Schreck's, the logo that they use, his public presentation, is all built on covering his ass and covering, his true identity, which Michelle Pfeiffer's Selena Kyle character, and then Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne character uncover, because they discover what the hell he's doing. Selena gets killed because of what she finds, and then Bruce, embarrasses, even though it's an intimate setting, he embarrasses Shrek by saying like, hey, we've got a power surplus. What's your angle? What are you trying to do? You're trying to do something here, and I don't like it, and I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to invest in this. I'm going to shut you down. So I mean, there's this great theme of duality throughout that starts with, of course, Shrek as far as the way he's presented. You could argue Bruce Wayne Batman. But then every other character that you see, even the city of Gotham itself goes through this duality of what kind of city it is. Because James, when we were conversing back and forth earlier, he made a joke about, Gotham is a city of 49 million people, but the same 30 people show up to every press conference. or opening or lighting of a tree or the circus. Like it's always the same people, but you have so many people there. And I jokingly said that's because the rest of the people are out working to keep Gotham running. So they can't afford to be there and doing all this cool stuff.
Wow, yeah, of course, I love that, and it's that's a cool thing to think about in terms of like where Gotham goes, like to it's privileged upper class versus like how it devolves, and what Gotham becomes certainly, in what Gotham can and is. It's fascinating to think about.
Even the tree lighting, they do the tree lighting twice because it doesn't go well either time.
Yeah.
And but like that's the image they're trying to portray. They want the aesthetic of the perfect Christmas tree lighting and all this stuff. But the reality of Gotham is, Gotham. So yeah, that's cool how that's duality as well. One thing I want to point out about Shrek, Max Schreck is the name of the actor who portrayed the Count in Nosferatu, 99 years ago. And his whole plan is to siphon energy out of Gotham. Like he's a literal fucking vampire.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool. Definitely not something I noticed when I was 14.
And he certainly looks like Nosferatu now that you think of it,
Yeah, he's got that
walking with but he's got the Gary Oldman and Francis Ford Coppola hair.
Yep. No, it's crazy though. I would have never noticed that, and back then. And it's neat to me how it must have been an important thing to somebody to name him that and give him vampire qualities. And there's somebody out there that's like, he, I added that to Batman Returns and nobody got it.
Yeah.
I forgot about this. The duality of the holiday, because you mentioned the tree, right? The tree lighting itself. And we talked about this on a couple of other episodes before with holidays themselves, and especially with the Christmas season. That idea of what it means and then how it's presented. So, if you have a holiday film, a traditional Christmas movie, those are not the ways that Christmas tends to go for any of us. It's usually something, that filled with anxiety, sometimes filled with angst, the obligation that you have to participate, or even just like the ceremonial function of, okay, well, we're going to eat at this time, and this is when we're going to hand out presents, and this is, all those things that go into it that you don't see represented in a typical Christmas movie. So I like the fact that, one, the tree itself represents the way that the holidays themselves are built off of a myth, because I've never been to a tree lighting, or at least I don't remember going to one. But there's nothing that I look at, around a tree lighting that I can say is very significant, other than it's about being in that moment. And maybe for that moment, how you might feel looking at the tree or about the holiday. But that feeling is very, very temporary.
Yeah, definitely. I myself went to a lot of Christmas tree lightings as a kid. It was me and my dad's thing. But it is totally about being in the moment, yes. Which is why it's weird to me that it's such a big deal. Like the lighting at 30 Rock. I mean, it's cool, but I've never been, so I can't totally speak on that. But I don't know.
I remember still like thinking about how the pettiness of the what was she like the Miss Gotham City.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
That just like being a thing. Like here we have our, I don't know, we have our perfect pretty wrapped in a bow symbol with all this like kind of all this darkness, the dark blood running under the streets of the city. But this is like got our perfect symbol and our perfect ceremony and all this sort of symbolism. I mean only to be followed by the Penguin getting in a replica, getting in a version of Batman's car and controlling Batman to do like terrible things. Such a fun moment. It's so fun to watch. I wonder if you guys think, I don't know, do you think this is the movie where I remember in the end it felt profound, but I didn't quite know why and how. But certainly now we do, because it's quite on the nose. But this is the movie where Batman became a feminist, goodwill toward men and women.
Oh,
it was just so pointed.
Well, I think Catwoman helped with that, because when she's talked about, the oppression that she faced and how Shrek had treated her, and the fact that he has now come to know her in those two different identities. Yeah, I could see how he's realizing, like, holy shit, I've been missing out. I've been really paying attention. Because Batman, even with the 1960s Adam West version, he wasn't too concerned with what women thought. He had his ascot, he had his smoking jacket, he was the Playboy billionaire before Tony Stark in the Avengers movies stole that line. He was a Playboy billionaire. He really didn't care. Well, I shouldn't say didn't care. He didn't seem to notice women's rights as much, or at least take them into consideration, because that wasn't his character.
Even in the animated series, but yes, and certainly back then, I mean, women were more or less, I don't want to say objects, but it's not the way objects that, like, Ian Fleming had James Bond treat women, or how women were portrayed. But you're not super far off. He wasn't, that wasn't his concern, but also his concern was his obsession, and his obsession was his objective, and his objective was, wrapped up in his own trauma and everything else. So he had to, you could argue he was just sort of keeping up the facade, and the facade is what it was. But for him it was so pointed that, like, they were like, it felt like they were making such a point by the end. But he certainly did, like, he come to know and understand and respect Catwoman and her initiative and her own trauma and experience by the end. And I remember too, I mean, again, just going back to being a 9-year-old boy and gender expectations and societal norms, I remember feeling affected, and maybe definitely in the subsequent years watching it, that she said, she was like running down, I can't remember verbatim, but it was when she had Shrek sort of held hostage with the taser, and she was saying, you want me to live with you and your perfect cast. Right. Like, she's basically saying, like, you want me to be fill a traditional woman's role. Mm-hmm. And that she so obviously was not going to do that for him. I don't fit into your image or your perception of what a woman is and what a woman does. I am my own person. I am Catwoman. Hear me roar. That I remember being, like, affected by that and thinking, like, man, what a bummer, because wouldn't she be the most awesome girlfriend, the most awesome woman to have, for her to be this cool? I don't know. It felt, it's I guess you could say progressive in that way. It was a cool moment, a cool scene for her to kind of run that through, and her to, come into her power and take power the way that she did. She'd earned his respect, certainly by those last moments. And, it was cool that he called it out, but it was like, the 1992 way of acknowledging that he was like a woke man becoming a feminist, and that 1992 way.
It's interesting because it actually happens the very first time he meets her. So when he's in Shrek's office and Selina comes in, and, Shrek's amazed she's there because she's supposed to be dead, and he has her escort Bruce out, right? Bruce is hitting on her, but he's respectful about it. It's like, I can clear my schedule, make some time to hear your story. Like, it's not sexual. It's nothing like that. But the thing that stuck out to me is she says, you don't look like somebody that would partner with Shrek. And he says, you don't seem like somebody who would put up with taking orders from him. And I thought that was really interesting, because it doesn't feel like a pickup line to me, like, he's legitimately like, you don't seem like you belong here, Right. And I thought that really stuck out to me, because while I haven't rewatched Batman, I don't remember him ever treating Vicky Vale that way. And it just seemed like a 92 woke guy, like you're saying, like, it was a different level of Batman. So I do think this is the beginning of that, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Well, no, with Vicky, I don't remember anything close to that conversation. He definitely didn't seem woke in the first one. But yeah,
No.
the whole moment where they meet, and even when Batman meets Catwoman, there's that moment where they fight and he hits her, and you're thinking about this as a kid. You're like, well, yeah, she's a bad guy. It doesn't matter if she's a woman and so Batman hits her, and she says, I'm a woman, and the way she reacts, and he steps back, and he's like, oh shit, I shouldn't hit a woman.
Yeah.
And then she responds by knocking him over the ledge and says, you should have let me finish. I'm a woman, and you shouldn't take me for granted. And I was like, I love that fucking moment. I love that line, because she's like, no, like, I'm here to fight you. Like, don't take it easy on me. I can go toe to toe with you.
Yeah, and you're making me. I don't know why this is stirring in me a memory of Dark Knight Rises, because I remember so little about it compared to Batman Returns, how it's burned into my brain. But where there are all these kind of iconic moments that stick out, and maybe it's the time and it being so influential at the period in our lives when Batman was still sort of new, and Batman Returns was a big deal in its own right. And, we had our third Nolan movie when Dark Knight Rises. And it was certainly, I think, my opinion is the weakest of the three, but it reminds me of only there being kind of one iconic layered moment in Anne Hathaway's portrayal of her, where she played the victim when I think it was police or goons who were like storming the room, and she just pretended to be hysterical. And I thought it was such an awesome moment. She was like screaming and screaming and screaming, and as soon as they were out of sight, the woman was out of sight, and the men who charged the room were out of hers. She just dropped it. But there were so many moments. I mean, it's a far more kind of bold, pulpy film, decades apart. But so much like you were saying, Don, just, so many great one-liners and behaviors, and I guess ultimately messaging and character. But it's just a bolder part. Stick with you.
Yeah, you just brought up character. And one of the things I really noticed in this that I love, this is why I love Batman. I love a Batman who questions himself and has to constantly analyze where his lines are. And everyone in this movie is sadistic on some level, and including our hero. And that's what I like. I like a character who's totally flawed, and that's what's always appealed to me about Batman. I make fun of it. I knock it down to he's a billionaire and his superpower is infinite money. But the Batman I shouldn't even say miss, because I don't think I give him a chance anymore. But the Batman that I crave is the one who's always trying to do what's right when it's hard. And I feel like Keaton was a god at that. Like, Keaton can portray that just through simple actions. And I don't feel like any other Batman really hit it the same way that he does. And I know everybody worships him and says he's the greatest, but he is.
He truly is of the bunch. He's the John McClane. He's the one who looks like the everyman. He's the one who seemed to, I don't know what it was that was about him, but like feel pain, but be grounded, play hysterical. I mean, you want to get nuts, let's get nuts from the first Batman, even if he's playing. The fact that he grabbed the fucking fire poker and raised his voice and put on this kind of, chest puffed air about himself. He was testing the Joker's limit and psychology. He was trying to match him with his crazy, but also, was it a put on, or was it who he really was? But anyway, he just was the most human of all of them. Everyone else. I mean, Christian Bale is one of the best actors. I'd say living, with his dedication and all else. But yeah, Keaton just had this. And maybe it's our experience sort of, growing up with him and often playing the blue collar Joe. But yeah, there's just something so human about it that makes him so affecting, which again, I think to compare to to Bruce Willis, and and playing John McClane, seeing someone who's human and has personality and feels like someone you could, sort of be in the company with or imagine yourself. But he's human. This person doubts himself, feels pain. He feels the weight of the world on him, and also has a sense of humor about it too, which is so fucking rad.
Definitely. I feel like Keaton just, every role, but Keaton just walks that line of sadistic and yet trying to do the right thing. And holy shit, it really struck me that this might be where my obsession with that came from. And it's been in my writing. It's been in the movies I love. Like, it's always one of those things that really appeals to me. And one of the highlights of doing this show is going back and doing stuff like this, or Beetlejuice, or just different things that really have kind of pointed me to, maybe that's where this started for you. Maybe it was this thing that happened, And I love that these are the doors that lead us where we go. And I hope to affect somebody like that someday.
Absolutely. I feel like you have to do so by the way of some iconic character. Like, when I think about like all these films that we kind of go back and talk about and retalk about, like the Ghostbusters, Bruce Campbell's Ash, sure, John McClane, Michael Keaton's Batman, Freddy Krueger, Jason, with the exception of maybe Jason, they all, I guess, if you really were to think about all of them and why they're so like burned into our brain, our childhood experience of them and introduction to them notwithstanding, and the era of the VHS notwithstanding, you think about all these like truly human, flawed people feels to be the through line, or there's just like a bold personality about them. I guess, Freddy's kind of a cartoon character, but it's just interesting to think about that. And in the context of the impressionable of the formative years, the truly average Joe up against some extraordinary circumstance, the ultimate Amblin formula. But for some reason, it just seems to be, I don't know, more palpable for the early films. Maybe just because, again, it was like, those formative years, seeing, Harrison Ford get the shit kicked out of him as Indiana Jones, and Michael Keaton like doubt himself and get his, sides split open and, scratched by Catwoman, only to try and, get close to her in the end.
It's interesting that a lot of the characters you brought up had many sequels as well. Do you think that plays into why we hold on to them? Because number one, we're seeing them, so we're getting more character, right? Not that Jason is consistent at all, but you know what I'm saying. Is it that, or is it like it's also like an event, right? Like I wouldn't say the Saw movies are great, but I'm a huge Saw fan, and for me it was the event. It was every year at Halloween, I get to go see this thing, and it's like this thing I look forward to doing. And I kind of wonder with everyone you named if that was a thing as well. It was these sequels are coming out, and it's like an event with my friends. And
it is, but you know what? Now Marvel and Star Wars are that. That's what this generation, and say what you will about all of it. Maybe unfortunately, because it's so saturated and inundated. But thank God, at least Favreau began the Marvel, the Marvel renaissance with, barely having a script and letting Robert Downey Jr. like improvise. So there's humanity and this fluidity to these films that's just inherent in the DNA of them. But anyway, like I think that, and also too, you look at Star Wars, like George Lucas can't direct actors. The actors he just had aboard were full of fucking personality. And so that you have the event certainly of the spectacle, but you also have the freedom for these, you look at these guys in their personal lives, Bruce Campbell, Taika Waititi, and all of the actors who are in the Marvel universe. These are like, they're really interesting, for the most part, interesting human beings you'd like to see in these sort of positions, fun people to watch. So yes, it's definitely, I think definitely an event, definitely it being part of our sort of earlier years and it being more impressionable times and, less distraction, call it, and everything else. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. The new version of that, the new wave of that is fortunately and yet unfortunately the repetition of the same universe genre in sci-fi with Star Wars and the MCU. Although they're trying where they can. They're trying, their initiative, Kevin Feige's initiative is to bring aboard directors who are like directors, even though everything is a fight and it's all, one big sort of collaborative soup with a studio. But yeah, that's the new age of what we had. That's the new Ghostbusters, the new Star Wars, the new all that stuff is just the remake of all of that, I guess. But then too all the other shit Disney Plus will put out. She-Hulk.
What about you, Don? I know you're a big MCU guy, whereas I am the complete opposite and only watch Ant-Man movies.
I never said I was a big MCU. I enjoy the movies are there, but it's not one of those things where I'm kind of like, I have to watch this, because I'm quick to criticize some of the lack of depth with stuff they present. However, I am looking forward to all the new Star Wars stuff whenever that takes place.
But
did I just ruin your question?
No. No, I don't think I asked it correctly. I meant, do you feel that? Do you feel that that's going to be the thing that the new generation?
Yeah. In that sense,
I haven't
yes.
seen enough, so I can't say that.
In that sense, yes, because with Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., and even, you mentioned Paul Rudd. Like everyone who has or I could even go, to somebody who solidified their legacy with the one film, with Chadwick Boseman. Mm-hmm. Each one of those actors has had an identity connected to that character, no matter all this. And I don't mean in a way that they've been typecast, but to the point where that character, people identify that character by the person who portrayed them on film. So I could easily see the same thing taking place, with there's probably going to be that argument now with the Spider-Man. I don't think there really will be one because there wasn't enough time that was built up, kind of like what you had with Michael Keaton, to where people could say, hey, he was the best for my generation, or at least from those first few films, he was the best one out of those guys. His films were better, much better quality, had a different feel, blah, blah, blah. But I could see the same thing with Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and a good number of people, because so many of those movies are being made either for that character or films in which those characters cross over into each other's stories, to where you're not going to look at Chris Hemsworth or you're not going to mention Thor and not think of Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Or you're not going to mention Captain America and not think of Chris Evans. There's just, I think for my daughter's generation and even a little bit older than her, that's what it's going to be like for them, where they're going to be used to seeing those people in those roles. And it's going to be hard to find anybody to fill them, when the eventual reboots take place in 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Not my daughter. I'm teaching her that Chris Evans equals Jake Weiler. So there you go. All right, let's bring this back to the movie. So we've kind of talked about the ending a little bit. I guess my question is this a satisfying ending for you guys? Like, from a writing point of view, I don't feel like most of the plot worked, but for some reason, this is such a great fucking ending. And I know, Josh, you've talked about it a little bit, but like, there's something so magical about this fucking ending. The only thing that pulls me out of it is, why the fuck did Batman take off his mask? She already knows who he is, and he doesn't want to reveal it to everybody else. What a weird moment.
Yeah, that felt very, very dramatic, over dramatic. But the movie's fucking operatic at that point. They're in, his the Penguin's ice castle. He probably knew he was going to take him out if he wasn't already taken out. But the fact that he was doing it in front of Shrek, but I guess it was out of love or whatever, like trying to make some bold statement. Like, he does this every movie. Val Kilmer did it, like, trying to shout, "I'm Batman" over the crowd. But Like, I will fucking give up my life to be with Michelle Pfeiffer. Maybe that's what he's saying. I think between the operatic, artful, physical showdown spectacle of, from the Penguin bursting through the ballroom and taking the kids all the way through the physical fight leading to the Penguin, pulling umbrellas and him, pulling the dud one and falling backwards into the water, all the way through the electrocution into that final moment with Alfred, and then ending with that satisfying. I always think of movies like Chronicle and The Invitation, where there's always just something else. There's always something a little bit more. Sure, if we want to, stay in the Batman realm, the ending of, Batman Begins, the Joker card, but to have Catwoman's head pop up in those last moments, like right. That's the stuff that, again, just like The Burning Clown, had us reprise our cheers in the theater and still makes it so fucking fun to watch. And also, too, that you wrap it up in the kind of like holiday Christmas blanket and under that umbrella. I think it's hella satisfying.
As I listened to you, I was thinking about it, and I might have solved my own problem. Like, maybe it goes back to the duality we've been talking about. And maybe he thinks Batman isn't stopping her. This isn't working. Maybe she has to see Bruce Wayne, and it just fails. I don't know. It's just a thought, but
I like that.
Possible.
I do love, and this is probably one of my problems with Batman Forever. Catwoman goes out of her way to say that she's saving one life for next Christmas. And then you get the pop-up that you talked about at the end where she's in front of the bat symbol and then she doesn't come back. And that makes me sad. Mm-hmm. And I want another Catwoman movie but it has to have, it needs to be like somebody needs to time travel and make it in 1995.
Michael shouldn't have asked for that many retakes of the kiss.
He slowed down production
to come back.
And then he pissed her off.
And I'm the same way with that ending where you just, especially now, 28 years after the fact, you just think like, what could have happened? What would the third one have been like if they'd both, or not even both would have been in the third one, but if she happened to show up, because in the Dark Knight Rises, you see how Bruce and Selina get away and have their own peaceful lives, and he kind of winks at Alfred or nods at him to let him know, like, I'm just going on with my life. But I'm okay with the ending. But again, for me, it's really that issue of I just wish that third one had been made, because I feel like we're missing out on so much as fans of like what could have possibly taken place. But then again, there's enough Batman material out there in cartoons, animated movies, to play around with that, where maybe the ending of Batman, at the ending of The Dark Knight Rises is where the third Michael Keaton Batman would have gone, where he just says, screw it, I'm giving all this up. Alfred, give all my money away to the orphans. We'll give the house to the orphans. They can live here. Here's some money for you to retire. I'm going to take some money and I'm going to just disappear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're operating under the idea that ending is real. We're going to have that conversation someday.
No. I'm saying that's how it could have gone.
Yeah.
It's again one of those things where we don't know what the reality is because it's an ambiguous ending.
Oh no, I mean that I believe that it's all in Alfred's head and Batman is dead. All right.
No,
I think maybe we'll get number 3 in The Flash when Michael Keaton reprises his role. The Flash and Spider-Man 3. This was I can't believe we've talked until the perfect moment where my computer is at 11%, and I can't believe it's been magic serendipity talking about one of my favorite holiday films. Yes, I'll say it. It's a holiday film.
Yes, it is.
You're not going to get an argument here.
Mm-mm.
It's a Christmas tree lighting. How could it not be a holiday film?
It's a Hanukkah movie.
And it's all about people trying to find their family.
That's right.
Oh man, no! I want to thank you so much for making me rewatch this. I have a special place in my heart for this, but it was great to dive into it again.
Well,
so
thank you for asking me to be a part of your show. It's killer. I'm a new fan, and I'm not just saying that because you did a 2.5 hour dissertation on my first movie. But it was such a pleasure, and also it's great to be given the opportunity to pick a movie that people don't often talk about or consider to be in the darker horror borderline genre, which I certainly think it is. And hey, we're right at the Christmas line here, so I hope it brings you Christmas joy listening to our intelligent takedown of it.
All right, do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you on social media?
Just at Josh Ruben on Instagram and Twitter. Josh Ruben, like Ruben Blades,
Well, thank you once again for coming on.
Yes,
I've had a blast, and we hope that you'll be back when your next film comes out and talk to us about that.
Well, if you guys like Werewolves Within, maybe we'll convince Gemma to like it too, and that could just be an all-out brawl.
Gemma is nodding yes right now, and she doesn't even know why. She's like, yes, I'll do that.
Check out Scare Me wherever you can rent and buy movies, and hopefully you'll enjoy it too.
And then listen to our episode.
Amen.
All right. So, as always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronama.com. Hey, you've reached James Sabata. I'm not here to answer the call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Please leave a message after the tone.
Hey, James, it's about 4.5 minutes since our last conversation, and I just wanted to say that, you know what, you're right. This isn't the right place to talk about Batman Returns, and if we're going to do a scary sequel, maybe we can talk about Home Alone 2. There's a lot of abandonment issues on my side, so there's something there. But yeah, you were right, I was wrong, and I hope you have a happy new year. Fuck you.